I'd like to welcome you all to the School Meals Matter to Me panel discussion. I'm Justin Strasburger, Executive Director for Full Plates, Full Potential, and we're so excited to have you join us to wrap up our School Meals Celebration Week. And we're really pleased to have our expert panelists who are joining us to discuss the critical importance of school meals and what's needed to secure their future. I want to touch on a few housekeeping items. We'll save time at the end for some questions from all of you and invite you to use the Q&A function in Zoom to submit your questions. If you have any technical or other challenges, please feel free to use the chat feature, and Kirsten Salisbury from our team will be able to support you. Zoom is auto-transcribing this, and you can view subtitles by clicking on the More menu in Zoom. And finally, we won't be inviting attendees to jump on audio or video, so feel free to just sit back and enjoy. Before we dive in to our panel discussion, we have some surprise guests who weren't able to join us today, but who sent along video messages to share with all of you.
Hey everyone, it's Troy Jackson here in the Maine State Senate. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was a bill that I had real privilege to sponsor this year, making it so that school lunches were free to everyone all the time. This is a bill that had been brought to me by Full Plates, Full Potential, and we talked about this bill early on, and while I was supportive of it, I don't know that I actually understood how meaningful it was, but one of the things that really brought it home to me, one of the things was the pandemic. Whenever kids were at home, they were still getting their meals delivered to them at home because they needed them. And I used to drive through my district and see coolers out the road where the school buses would bring the meals and deliver them into those coolers. And there were a lot through all my towns across the district. And at first I didn't really know what it was, but then it came to me that it was kids that really depend on the meals that they get when they're at school. And we were continuing to do that free of charge. And so that really brought that home to me, and it made me think more about when I was a kid, with my parents, sometimes the problems that would happen with kids that weren't as well off. In Maine, I think 1 in 6 kids that goes to bed at night hungry, food insecure. Those meals that they get at school are often the best meals that they get throughout the day, something they depend on. And why we would want kids to go to school hungry, and while they're there all day be hungry, is just really hard to imagine. And what a burden you take off the parents in a society today that we worry about healthcare, we worry about home heating oil, we worry about putting money away for college education, we worry about so many things. This is something that we came together on as a legislature, as a state, and make it better for our kids, and something as basic as being fed, not going hungry. So that's, probably one of the bills that I've enjoyed the most. I'm certain I'll look back on as one of the things I was the most proud about. Just making sure the kids get fed.
Hi, my name is Ryan Fecto, and I serve as Speaker of the Maine House. As a child growing up in Biddeford, I will never forget driving to the J.J. Nissen plant with my mom and little sister late one evening to fill up a milk crate with food they were giving away. Back home, we loaded it all into the refrigerator, and that fridge was stuffed full of fruit pies and white bread. I remember thinking, wow, we finally have food. I was a kid who was food insecure. Every bit helped my mom, my sister, and me. During the pandemic, childhood food insecurity increased dramatically, prompting the USDA to fund free school meals for all children on a temporary basis. This has shown us what is possible, and Mainers agree there is no need to go backwards. We have the chance to support kids' health and their ability to learn by making sure our children have something so critical to learning and growing: nutritious meals. I want to thank all of you for the work you're doing for school meals. I am with you in this fight for Maine kids.
So great to have those messages from our legislative leaders here in the state. As President Jackson shared, passing our School Meals for All bill this past spring was an exciting step forward in the fight against child hunger. As you'll hear today, child hunger has significant negative impacts on our kids and our state, and school meals are a proven solution to help reduce food insecurity. And while we're thrilled to have passed this landmark legislation, there is still much work to be done. We are actively working to secure the full funding needed for School Meals for All, as well as continuing our efforts to eliminate the other barriers facing our kids when it comes to having consistent access to meals. So to learn more about this, I'm pleased to be joined today by 4 expert panelists who bring a variety of important perspectives to this work. Dr. Becca Boulos, Executive Director of the Maine Public Health Association, who's on audio due to bandwidth issues. Craig Larrabee, President and CEO of Jobs for Maine's Graduates. Keagen Becvar, a Poland Regional High School student and JMG student leader. And Kristen Miale, the President of Good Shepherd Food Bank. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you.
Dr. Boulos, I'd like to start with you. From a public health and pediatrics perspective, what sort of impacts does hunger have on children?
Yeah, thank you for the question and the invitation to be here today. And I'm sorry that I can't be on video, but hopefully you can hear me okay. It's a really important question. I mean, we know that children's growing bodies rely on a nutritious diet for healthy growth and development, both in terms of their macronutrient needs, so protein, carbohydrates, and fats, but also in terms of making sure that they have enough vitamins and minerals for their physical health and for their cognitive health. As one example, glucose is what our brain's primary fuel source, and we derive glucose from carbohydrates. So if children aren't eating enough or they aren't getting enough calories, we do see challenges with things like attention and behavior and other types of development. We can also see in the short term and even in the mid to longer term, but negative health effects in terms of developing anemia or asthma. We can see motor skill and language impairment, and also issues with social and behavioral problems. And I do just want to point out that poor diet quality, even if children, I think sometimes there's this perception that as long as they have enough calories, it's okay, and that's not true. Poor diet quality can actually increase children's risk for developing obesity because of changes to their metabolism and because of the types of calories that they're consuming. And so while I was talking about glucose and how important it is, it's also really important that they're getting enough fiber and other vitamins and minerals.
Thank you. And from your perspective, what role can school meals play in combating child hunger and addressing some of these health challenges that you described?
It's another really good question. So schools are by far the most convenient and consistent place where children can access healthy food, which they may not have at home. In some areas, we see that households may not have access to a grocery store, and so they may be in what we call a food desert, or even in a food swamp. And that's when there's a lot of fast food places that are around. And so children may, while they may be getting enough calories, they may not be getting enough nutrients. And so just going back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of the quality of the food being really important. In 2010, Congress passed the Health and Hunger-Free Kids Act, and that act changed the meal patterns for the school and for school breakfast and lunch programs. It increased the amount of fruits and vegetables. It created age-specific recommended serving sizes, just recognizing that kids do have different calorie needs as they age. It made sure that only low-fat and fat-free milk were served and that there were more whole grains that were available. And so what that did was that it ensured that at both breakfast and lunch, children were getting that more comprehensive, improved diet quality that I was just saying is so important for their healthy growth and development. And so when kids have enough, calories, but also enough nutritious foods, we do see improvements with their healthy growth and development. We see lower stress, certainly for their homes. And so parents know that their kids are eating healthy food at school, and so they're not having, that's one, slightly less worry that they have to have. And we also see improved other outcomes like improved attendance, reduced suspensions, improved ability to pay attention while they're in class. And then building off of what I mentioned earlier about the link with obesity and insufficient calories, we have seen positive relationships between participation in school meals and weight-related outcomes. There was a paper that was published just last year by Erica Kenny and her colleagues, and she was looking at the impact of the passage of the Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act that I just mentioned, and its impact on weight status. And what she found, what her team found, was that particularly among children in poverty, the risk of obesity declined substantially each year after the Act's implementation. And so what they found in their analysis was that had that Act not been passed, the prevalence of obesity would have been 47% higher in 2017 had there been no legislation. So it's about providing school meals, and it's also about providing nutritious meals. And that's why acts like this are so important.
Thank you. A lot of great data in there. I've never heard of food swamps before either. That's a new one for me. Yeah. Keagen, I'm so glad that you're able to join us. I think it's really important to have a student's perspective here. Back in the spring, you testified in support of LD 1679, the School Meals for All bill. So clearly this is something you feel passionate about. Tell us, what do school meals mean to you? Why are they important from your perspective?
So growing up, we were like one of the most luckiest families. Like there's just 3 of us, and my mom would like work a couple jobs because she went to school to be a nurse, and she liked being a nurse. But then I think she just stopped or something. We moved around a couple times, so. And while she was working a lot, all we'd have is a school lunch a lot of time, other than a few like snacks and a few dinners together, because even now she still works a lot at night, but we're better off because both my mom and my stepdad have better jobs. So like, I think it's just important because to look back at what I went through as a kid to what kids nowadays might be going through with like what I experienced.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. Craig, Keagen is a JMG student. Tell us a little bit about the work of JMG and how it intersects with child hunger and school meals.
Sure. First of all, Keagen is a JMG student, but more importantly, he's a JMG leader. He's done a remarkable job in setting the tone for the work of our partnership with Full Place, Full Potential. So my organization, JMG, we work with over 10,000 students across the state. And like myself growing up, about 70% of those students come from economically disadvantaged households. Our job is to help young people like Keagen, future leaders of our state, not only graduate, but have a plan and an aspiration, and that being an aspirational plan for them to either go on to higher education or directly into the workforce. For any student, we need to make sure that their basic needs are being met. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I knew that we had an issue with food insecurity with our students, but I just didn't really understand the depth and magnitude of that issue, that social societal issue. So I had early on reached out to my staff. So I have 148 JMG specialists in middle schools, high schools, community college, university system around the state, asking them what was going on as the pandemic started. And I quickly realized that this issue of food insecurity was much larger than what I thought it was. And my board and myself and our executive team at JMG, we reached out to our private sector friends, and we raised $500,000 and was able to provide $100 grocery gift cards to 5,000 JMG families across the state that needed it the most. But knowing that was just a Band-Aid, I reached out to Justin Alfon and wanted to know more about what Full Place, Full Potential was all about, and find if there could be ways in which we could partner together. And in those early conversations, one thing that Justin mentioned was it's really time, or it's past time. We really need to get the voice of the student in this conversation, and figuring out how we as adults can engage our students in this conversation, because more than likely they may have some of the answers that we need to get more of our young people to eat the nutritious meals that they need to be successful in their education. So I'm sure we're going to talk about the bill passed, which is fantastic. That took away one barrier, but there's still many other barriers. And I know Keagen and his team in Poland have been thinking of different ways about how to engage students to get that information out there, if you will. In talking with Keagen recently, it really, again, kind of hit home with me, is that I think students like myself growing up, it was like, am I the only one? I didn't realize there were so many other students that were facing a similar issue. And I think through the work that we're doing with Full Place, Full Potential, that the JMG students and now students in general in these 10 pilot programs that we have across the state are realizing that it's a majority of kids that are facing this issue. And there's an opportunity to create real change in the culture in public schools to help this go away.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, so Keagen, as Craig mentioned, thanks to your testimony and that of others, we were successful in passing the School Meals for All bill. So from your perspective, now that cost is no longer going to be an obstacle, what other barriers do you see that might keep students like yourself from accessing these meals on a consistent basis?
So like first, I see a lot more people eating now, so that's a good thing. But there's also definitely gonna be barriers like you guys mentioned. And what I came up with is like, I know there's like mental health and eating disorders out there where people just don't eat. It's not like sometimes they want to, but they just don't. Some people have social anxiety and don't like eating in front of others. It's kind of like just getting up and talking in front of a crowd, but with food. But I also, during this meeting, came up with that they don't like the school's food. Because I hear a lot of students say, oh, we don't like school food. We rather have home lunch. But for some people, if they don't like the food, it's all they have. But they sometimes just skip it because they just don't want it. Because they think they're better off not eating than eating this. Or like it's just not filling to some people.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Dr. Boulos, Keagen sort of talking about a little bit that occasionally the public perception of school meals is not always a positive one, with some folks questioning their nutritional value or appetizing nature. How would you respond to this, and what opportunities do you think exist to continue to strengthen the quality and perception of school meals?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, when I think about eating school meals, as a kid, I think about, French toast sticks or French bread pizza. And so I know about that public perception piece, although that was admittedly a very long time ago that I was eating that. But I do think that, the standards that I had mentioned before, ensuring that there is enough, there are enough fruits and vegetables and fiber and other nutritious aspects of the food is important. And I think being sure that people know about those standards. Not everybody does. And so raising awareness about that. I also think that there's a marketing piece, but I also think that there are things that can change in the school food environment. The order that kids pick up their lunch their lunch can actually matter. So if they go to a salad bar, for example, or before they go to pick up other items, research suggests they may fill up their plates with more vegetables than they would have otherwise. Ensuring kids have enough time to eat, which he was just talking about. It's good to see people eating, but sometimes they don't have enough time. And so making sure that kids have enough time to eat. And there's also research that suggests that having recess before lunch can improve food consumption and lower food waste because kids aren't trying to eat quickly to then go outside and play. If they play first and then eat, then now they've had their recess. It might help both with their, making sure they have time to eat. And like I said, lowering food waste. But I think a lot of it in terms of the public perception is just raising awareness about the foods that are being served. I think promoting programs that support local producers and growers is really important. And I know that there was a bill this session that we supported around the local food fund and increasing resources for that. So I think promoting that contribution of the program, both to child health, but then also to the local food economy is really important.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of great opportunities there for sure. Kristen, I'd love to bring you in here. I suspect most folks on the call are familiar with the incredible work you all are doing at Good Shepherd. But wonder if you could share a bit about how school meals and our work at Full Plates sort of fits into your efforts.
Sure. So school meals are incredibly important to the whole scope of levers we have to end hunger. And we always talk about at the food bank that we are the safety net underneath the safety net of all of the federal nutrition programs. And The food bank exists because those programs are not funded adequately and they're not reaching everybody that needs them. And so we are here as an example to show that that we need to do better. And obviously we have the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, also known as food stamps, which serves so many families and children. But then the school meals and also provides additional support for families, because we know oftentimes SNAP does not provide enough. Most families on SNAP, their SNAP benefits run out in the first 2 weeks of the month. And so having the additional support of school breakfast and school lunch helps those families stretch those SNAP dollars even further so that they can be food secure all month long. But when families aren't getting that food, or when kids are not getting the breakfast or the lunch or the after school snack, then the families are running out of resources to be able to get that food. And that's when they have to rely then on their local food pantry, the Charitable Food Network, which is are the community programs that we support through the food bank. These programs are mostly all volunteer led. We rely entirely on donated food and donated funding. So it's a very, while it's an amazingly resilient system, and they do incredible work, it's also a pretty vulnerable way to rely on making sure children have a critical resource like food. And so it's not uncommon, for example, to have, 1 or 2 volunteers decide to retire and a whole community loses access to food because a food pantry closes. So these school meals are absolutely critical to so that we take some pressure off the charitable food system. The charitable food system was set up 40 years ago as an emergency response to what was thought to be a temporary situation. And unfortunately, the problem has only continued to grow. So now this emergency response is now actually serving a chronic need. And that system is heavily strained. So making sure that all kids have these nutritious, as Dr. Boulos said, some of these kids, this is the most nutritious food they're getting all day, is just incredibly important to help alleviate the strain on the charitable food network.
Thank you. And do you have any sort of sense of how this School Meals for All legislation will impact things as it relates to sort of the need being put on you all?
Yes, I mean, it's going to be millions of more meals that are going to be accessible for families. We estimate that 40 million meals are currently missing every year on Mainers' plates, and that's the work that the Charitable Food Network, that's the gap that has to fill. Millions of those meals will now be provided through the school meals program, as opposed to having to come from the Charitable Food Network. So that's going to have an amazing impact. I think the other impact that school meals has too is it really acknowledges what food is, that food is a critical investment in making sure children can access their education. It's not any different than making sure kids have pens and pencils and computers and books. Food is an investment. And I think one of the biggest barriers or challenges in our work is changing the public narrative that hunger is something that you should feel shamed about, or that hunger is something that needs to be dealt with kind of under the table, keep it hush hush. This is something embarrassing. And that's not the case at all. I look at, programs like Universal Meals that's an investment in our kids' education. It's preventative health care. It's no different than making sure kids have the medication they need if they have an illness. Or again, those critical investment supports. So it normalizes it. It recognizes this is something that we all need and we all need to invest in. And that is going to have ripple effects, I think, throughout all of the kind of anti-poverty work that we're all working on.
Very well said. Going off of that, I think we're in the midst of a global pandemic that's having an impact here. And I think we're seeing a lot more folks who weren't previously food insecure wrestle with that. What are some of the things that you've seen as a result of the pandemic in terms of how that's changed things, particularly around child hunger?
Sure. So, In addition to supporting policy, things like the universal school meals, we also have our own school-based programs to support providing food for children and families when they're not in school. And that is our school pantry program. We have over 200 schools that we partner with in Maine to provide food access programs at the school. And the benefit of these programs is it makes food access programs more accessible for working families who are challenged sometimes to getting to a community food pantry that may only be open a few hours a week or even a month. By putting a food access program in the school, it makes it easier for families to get the food they need and to do it in an environment that they already trust and are used to. And then we also hear from many of our schools that having a food access program creates opportunities to engage with parents in a more meaningful way than they otherwise were able to before. When the pandemic hit, we found that these school programs really were a lifeline for so many families to get the food that they needed because they were the schools did an incredible job of making sure that the school lunches still got out to children in need. And then our school pantries started partnering with the same transportation systems that were being set up. So not only were families getting that lunch, but they were also getting groceries from the school pantry program. In surveying families that we were serving through this time, 45% of the families were using the school pantry program for the first time. And so it really also showed how much the pandemic was creating hunger situations for families who never had that experience before. Our school programs distributed more than twice the amount of food during the pandemic than they did prior to, which I think also just really showed the partnership with the schools and their amazing innovation to get the food out to families who needed it. So we're incredibly proud to partner with the schools. They make it happen. In addition to just not only K through 12, we also have over 35 Head Start programs that also now have food access programs, as well as all the community colleges in Maine as well. So really making sure throughout the entire spectrum of children in their learning life that they are getting the food they need to be able to fully access their education.
It's really, really wonderful, but also sobering statistics at the same time. And I think underscores what Dr. Boulos was saying earlier around the schools being this sort of central location and the value of getting food directly to folks rather than the added barrier of them needing to go and go to one more place to access it. Keagen, from your perspective, we've heard about a number of different barriers that continue to exist. You raised some, we heard some from others. What role can students like you play in helping to break down those barriers? Where should the student voice live in all of this?
So, like I said about the mental health and eating disorders, like if you're a student who sees someone who could be clearly struggling that you think they are, don't be afraid to go to like one of your school counselors, because I know here at Poland we have 3 school counselors. One for like A through F and so on and so forth. Like if you see someone with a struggling, you can always just go speak to like either help them, like offer your support, or like if they refuse it or like ignore you or something, just go to a counselor, say what you're seeing, like it can help a long way. And also like talk to a friend. Like if you're struggling yourself, you could talk to a friend. Or just try to get yourself out there, like start a food drive for when we're not in school. Because I know like there's vacation days, like we have a couple weeks of the year that we don't have school at all. So like you could go to like the school board or something and say we should do food drives for this. So these students can eat while they're home. Because I know because of the pandemic, a lot of families have been laid off from work. So first they were struggling at first, but now they could be struggling worse now than they were then. Or like we also have people that are quarantined. So I just think it could all connect back to like being a student who wants to go help by like starting your own food drive or having the school start something. Or like maybe bring up how we can do what we did the last like year and a half, I think, where we had like people drop off food for like the week. Like we could do that during vacation days, I think. As a student, you could set that up.
Thank you. Yeah, we hear a lot of talk when we talk about school meals about the negative impact of stigma and this feeling that sometimes students aren't accessing meals because they see it as a handout and they don't want to have to, raise their hand amongst other folks. I know it was certainly a big talking point as we were trying to push through the School Meals for All bill of sort of normalizing that. You heard Kristen speak to sort of the value of just normalizing it as part of the day and just part of the learning experience. Keagen, from your perspective, do you think that the School Meals for All will have an impact in helping to alleviate some of that challenge around stigma and some of that mental load that folks who struggle with hunger might feel?
Yeah, I think it'll have a positive impact. I don't think I had one instantly because I still hear people in the lunchroom say, "Oh, I can't get this. People will know I'm getting it for free," or like, "I don't think I can afford this." And then I hear other students say like, "Oh no, it's free for the whole state this year, so you don't got to worry about it." So I think just off what's happened so far, people are starting to become more calm in the sense that they know it's free for everyone. So they're kind of taking a relaxing, like, sit back and like, okay, this is free. I can eat it. I don't got to pay.
It's really great to hear. Craig, you brought up the partnership that we recently launched together. That is trying to center voices like Keagen and other students to bring them into the problem solving here and helping think through some creative and innovative solutions here. And we've already seen some great ideas brought forth from that. Can you share a little bit about what we saw happen up in Machias?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Justin. As you mentioned, our partnership, we've chose 10 different school districts to work with, and bringing young leaders like Keagen to the table to have that conversation with their food nutrition directors, the administration of their school, and other community leaders to think about how all the different barriers that still exist in terms of getting all of our young people to take advantage of nutritious meals. One of the most interesting parts of the partnership for me has been the work that's been going on in Machias. Believe it or not, Machias High School does not have a kitchen, and their meals are actually being made at the middle school and then trucked over to the high school. And our great JMG folks down there and school district and then getting the voice of our students all sitting down to think about how can we make this better. And I'm just really proud to say that our kids and the school district have come together. There's been many, many conversations about what the needs are for the not only the kids, but the families in the Machias area. There's been money that's been raised. There's been conversations with USDA. There's been conversations at the community level. Full Place, Full Potential and JMG has put some money into this project in Machias. And I'm just proud to say that we now do have a hot area in terms of food being delivered to the school and having to be I think it's called a serving station, so to be able to keep the meals hot. That was a big piece in terms of why the kids weren't taking advantage of the meals, because they got cold by the time they got to the high school. So there's more work that needs to be done in Machias, but it was really the survey work and getting the students involved in that survey work. And then just the magic moments of having a group of kids sit down with the food nutrition director and listen to what the needs of the students, and then the students to hear what's going on in the food nutrition director's world. They quickly learned about staffing issues and supply chain issues, and it led to the students starting to volunteer at the kitchen at the middle school and at the serving station at the high school to help with some of the staffing issues. So it's really about bringing the community together. And this isn't about passing blame on to anyone. This is an issue we're all facing, and how can we all come together? And I think really important to all of this work is getting the students to engage in this so that they realize that this is an issue, that they do realize they have a voice and they can be part of the solution.
So much to love about that and what we're seeing there. You heard Dr. Boulos talk about local foods and the trying to get more local foods in there, and we did pass this expansion of the local food fund last session that further incentivizes schools to take advantage of local produce. But if they don't have kitchens to process that, it makes it really difficult to take advantage of that. So there's all these things that come together to make this stuff happen and make it possible. And really great to be able to have an opportunity for the students to learn about this and be a part of the solutioning. Kristen, from your perspective, What's next? Where do we go from here? Where do we go in this fight for child hunger? A big, expansive question, I know.
Yeah, no, well, as you know, we also need to make sure we get this bill fully funded. So that's
Yes.
top of mind for sure. And to me, this is where, the experts like Dr. Boulos drive this home so well, that we can't afford not to fund this. We are already paying for children not having enough healthy food, and not only on the children themselves and their health outcomes and their own development, but it also, the data clearly shows that children who are food insecure also have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and aggression. And Craig said one in 5 kids in Maine are food insecure. That means in every Maine classroom, you have anywhere from 4 to 5 kids who are food insecure and having all of those issues. That impacts the entire classroom, and it impacts the teacher and where they have to spend their time. So we are already paying for not investing and making sure kids have the healthy food they need. So that's first and foremost. Also, there are so many other similar programs that the pandemic has showed that when we increase funding for these programs, we immediately see improvements in food insecurity. So another one was the expansion of the child tax credit. Within weeks of the child tax credit being expanded, the research was showing immediate decreases in child food insecurity. And so similarly with expansions to SNAP and the modernization of SNAP that also happened to the pandemic of increasing the thrifty meal plan, all of those are going to have real and meaningful impacts on strengthening food security in households with children. And those have to continue. The USDA did come out with more data on food insecurity for 2020 and actually showed food insecurity went down for 2020, which seems good. But when you disaggregate that data, households with children, their food insecurity rate went up. So we clearly still have more work to do here. And then I think, again, one of the most important things we need to do to address childhood hunger is, again, this issue of changing the public narrative of what this is all about. That this is not about charity. This is about investing in our human capital and making sure that every child has the opportunity to thrive. I mean, if we can just imagine a Maine where every single student has full access to their education and has the opportunity to reach their full potential, the outcomes for Maine are just astounding. And we are already, for those 1 in 5 kids, we are not from the start, we are not giving them that chance. So we have to start just changing this thought that this is a zero-sum game here, that if we put money here, we're going to lose it there. No, this is probably one of the best investments we can make.
Couldn't agree more. I'm seeing some questions from the attendees coming in, so I want to turn to that. And this can serve as a reminder to folks to click that Q&A button down there if you'd like to chime in. First question that I'm seeing here, thinking about child hunger when school is not in session, how might we as a state, with many children who live in rural areas unable to access some of the summer meals program sites, ensure that children have healthy, adequate food in the summer too? I'm happy to jump in with a perspective here, but would love to hear from others. So I think this is definitely a big issue and something that we saw during the pandemic. When schools had to go remote, all of a sudden, all schools were thrust into thinking about transportation as a major challenge of how do we physically get meals to schools. And transportation has been a challenge that rural districts and rural communities have faced for quite a long time. We were really happy to be able to, in a partnership with Hannaford, be able to donate 3 brand new meal delivery vans to 3 districts to support them in some of those efforts. And so I think that's one way to sort of help expand some of these opportunities to bring meals to school. Directly to families, and help summer meals sites expand the number of sites and locations where they have for folks to make it as easy as possible for them to pick up those meals. So that's one example of a solution, but I do think finding ways to expand the opportunities and the ways and places where folks can pick up those meals is really critical.
Yeah, and Justin, I'd also add the summer EBT program is a great solution for a rural state like Maine, which essentially, rather than having a summer meal site program, which has all the transportation issues that you talked about, is instead just increasing the family SNAP allotment instead to make up for those lost meals with school not being in session. It's a much more effective, efficient way to get that funding directly into the hands of families to be able to buy the food they need.
It's an excellent point. We're joined today by one of our wonderful state representatives, who is a Representative Salisbury, who is a huge supporter of this bill, and she's asked, what can I do as a legislator to continue to address food insecurity in children? The one I would point to first and foremost is supporting our efforts to make sure that we get the funding needed to make sure that School Meals for All can be a lasting piece of legislation that's just part of the budget each and every year. We're working with the governor's office to try to get into her supplemental budget that'll be being presented in the coming months, and but certainly need legislative support to just remember that this is important. And I would just underscore what Kristen has said a couple of times here, is just thinking about food as just the basic need that it is, and it not being this just about hunger, but it being about education, being about Maine's future. For us to be successful, we're the oldest state in the country. For us to be successful, we have to invest in our families, we have to invest in our children. And that starts with ensuring that they have what they need to be able to learn and thrive and go far in education and careers, like Craig and the team at JMG is working with them on. And that starts with just the basic needs of making sure they're fed. So I think just thinking about that approach and thinking about being aware of the many ways that it impacts all of these conversations, whether it's education or environmental impacts, or the way we work with our various food producers in the state. All of this can really be tied back to this issue area.
Justin, can I hop in there for just a quick moment? There's a bill that we're supporting, that the Maine Public Health Association is supporting next session, and I just want to flag it, given that question. It's LD 1693. It's sponsored by Representative Talbot Ross, and there's a lot going on in the bill. There's a lot of different components, but the ones that are related to this conversation are that it ensures alignment between early childhood education and school nutrition and physical activity standards with national ones. And that includes the smarter snack standards. So earlier when Keagen was talking, he was saying that sometimes kids don't like the food that is served. And so there may be other competing foods that are available besides the school meals. And so this, for example, would ensure that those meet national standards, so they're healthier. It also ensures that kids have enough time to eat, which we were talking about earlier in terms of food waste. So in addition to ensuring alignment between state standards and national ones, the bill also provides funding for an obesity prevention position at Maine CDC and funding for that program. And as I mentioned earlier, there are associations between food insecurity and weight status. And so ensuring that there's funding for a staff position and that program are really important, especially when we think about how we're talking about food insecurity. And so in those environments that kids are in, there could be other types of disparities that they're experiencing. And so making sure that we have support for state standards so that it's not dependent upon where they live and the income of the community that they're in is really important. So I just want to flag that bill, given that question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, assuming we're able to be successful in securing the full funding for School Meals for All, I think that is the next piece, is to look at the composition of the meals and looking at some of these other barriers and making sure that meals are nutritious, that they're culturally appropriate, that schools have what they need to make sure that they're getting students not just access to a meal, but access to the kind of meal that's really going to fuel their success. Another question here. How are food service directors impacted by this change? I'm assuming that's speaking to the passage of the School Meals for All. I'll say our hope is that the intent of this is to help reduce some of the administrative burden. School nutrition directors I can't say enough about the work that they and their teams do and have done, especially over this last year and a half during the pandemic. It's truly incredible work. And one of the things that they have to do that has nothing to do with feeding kids is tracking who's paying and who hasn't, and chasing kids down for lunch money, and dealing with school meal benefit applications. And that is not what any of us, I think, want those folks having to spend their time on. So what it will immediately deal with is that piece of sort of chasing kids down for lunch money and that sort of thing. That just won't happen. Right now, families still do need to fill out the meal benefit application because that's what allows the state to bill the federal government for the reimbursement. We and many others are working federally to try to change some of that, to try to change some of those provisions. And there are some of the provisions in the Build Back Better bill that would have a significant impact on this. Things like an expansion of the community eligibility provision that would free up some of the administrative burden here and actually reduce some of the cost to the state. And actually, there is a federal level universal meals bill that's on the table right now. I think it is pretty unlikely that will pass, unfortunately, but it's there. So it's exciting to see these conversations happening at the national level, and I think we as a state deserve a little bit of that credit. We in California were first in the nation by a matter of hours. California beat us on having this signed, and I think it's forcing this conversation in a really important way at a really important time. I think it will definitely reduce some of the administrative burden on school nutrition directors. Still probably not enough, but we're absolutely seeing that as part of the future to getting this right too. Is we need to make sure school nutrition team members who do so much amazing work here have what they need to do this and be able to focus just on feeding kids, and which is what they want to focus on. I think along those lines is a question here about how are we addressing the shortages of food, supplies, and staffing. Folks may have read some recent articles. There's tremendous challenges in the supply chain right now that are having issues across lots of industries, but definitely impacting schools' abilities to menu plan and to get consistent meals in front of kids. Kristen, do you have any insights in this? I'm sure you guys deal with plenty of supply chain challenges of your own with the food bank.
Yeah, so we definitely were faced with those challenges last year. But I would say in the past 6 months or so, we've seen an improvement, and we ourselves are not seeing those supply chain shortages right now. We have had people reach out to us saying, can you help with the schools? So we've been trying to figure out what are the schools buying that's different than what we're buying, and why it seems like we're operating in different supply chains, and why is that happening? So we're trying to get to the bottom of this as well and see if there is an opportunity where we might be able to help. My understanding, which is not very deep, is it does have to do with that the schools they do buy through a different channel that's through USDA commodities, and that's where there's some challenge there. They don't go and as much as go to kind of just the open. They don't have all the vendors, for example, that we're able to work with to be able to get the food that we need. So I've heard it's a challenge. We're trying to see if we can help, but we have not figured it out yet.
Yeah, the federal government just committed some money towards this. Unfortunately, this isn't necessarily the kind of thing you could just throw money at, but it can help in certain circumstances. And one of the other things Full Plates, Full Potential does, aside from advocating for the systems change, is we do some grant making as well to support implementation of things. And so we've also been giving grants to schools to support them in some of this added staffing they need in a short-term capacity, or increased packaging costs, or new equipment that they need that they didn't need a year and a half ago. And we'll continue to do that to support some of the implementation of these things. So it's definitely something we're monitoring. We're trying to listen to schools and school nutrition directors and see how we can be helpful. There's a lot out of our control and a lot of folks' control, unfortunately, but we are continuing to monitor it. I think it's something that frankly, the whole country is dealing with. It's not unique to Maine, and it's certainly not unique to school meals. One last question here that I'm seeing. What about the gap in eligibility for those that make slightly too much to be approved for SNAP and reduced lunches, yet they're still under the 150% poverty line. So if I'm reading this correctly, I think I have good news, which is that that is exactly what the School Meals for All bill is sort of intended to do. Effectively, here in Maine, there's no longer categories of free, reduced, or paid meals, and that's really important. You might think of the paid meal, some folks might think of that as, those folks can afford it. It's just not always the case. In fact, a family of 4 living here in Maine where both parents are working full-time minimum wage jobs doesn't qualify for free or reduced lunch. And I certainly don't view that as a living wage or feeling like folks who should just be able to afford it. So as far as parents and families are concerned, there are no different distinctions. Those distinctions do still matter when it comes to the federal level in terms of getting the reimbursement, and that's where those school meal benefit applications for now come into play, and why that data is really important for us to be able to get the right amount of federal reimbursement. But it makes no difference and has no impact on students at all and families at all. So hopefully that's good news for folks.
And if I can just add, Justin, too, I mean, that's and I think for outside of the school meals, that's exactly where the Charitable Food Network comes in. I mean, we know our research shows that 37% of people who go to food pantries, they go for that very reason. They earn just too much to qualify for any assistance programs, but they are not earning enough money to get their basic needs met. And so that is the role of the Charitable Food Network, which we will continue to do until we get these programs expanded so that all families who need help are able to secure the food that they require.
Great. Well, before we wrap up, just would love to open it up. If any of our other panelists have any sort of final thoughts or anything else that they'd love our attendees to hear before we go.
Justin, just want to thank you for the opportunity, speaking with Keagen and our other students. We want to thank Full Place, Full Potential for all the work that you're doing and the leadership that Full Place, Full Potential is providing. And we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Yeah, and I'd like to think the same about getting this opportunity twice now. And I hope before I graduate, there's a third, fourth, maybe a couple opportunities. It doesn't matter as long as I get a couple more, because I've actually enjoyed the time preparing the last 2 times. I've enjoyed joining the speaking and being part of something this big.
Keagen, we'll definitely call on you for things like this and testifying before the legislature, I'm sure several more times. Dr. Boulos, anything you'd like to add?
I just want to echo the appreciation for this conversation and also for your advocacy efforts. This particular legislation, I think is incredibly important, and you certainly have the support of Maine Public Health Association in securing funding and in other efforts as well. So thank you again for all of your work, and to Kristen and Craig and Keagen as well for your efforts.
Thank you. Kristen, any final thoughts?
No, just likewise appreciate the leadership the Full Plates, Full Potential had in really leading this legislation. We were proud to partner with you on it, but appreciate the leadership role that you played. And Keagen, you're a rock star, so keep it up. I watched you testify. You did a phenomenal job, and we're so honored to have you as part of this team. And then I just want to echo, Justin, something that you said about the impact that this legislation has had is going beyond Maine. We're part of the Feeding America network of food banks all around the country. I've been on multiple calls in the past few months where Maine has been called out saying, you have helped us start to have this conversation in our state. And so it really is having a nationwide impact.
Love it. Yeah. Onward and upward. We did have one final question here, which is I'll use as a segue, which is what can I, as a supporter of your work, do to best support your efforts? And I was going to mention this anyway, but would really encourage folks, hopefully you've been following along this whole week as we've been talking and celebrating about school meals. I encourage folks to visit our website, www.fullplates.org. You can learn more. You can sign up for updates to stay informed. And please donate if you're able to support our efforts to continue to break down barriers. I'd also just specifically call attention, there was an action item we had a couple days ago as part of this week to help us thank school nutrition teams. And that is still something that folks can help us do. There's a form you'll find on our website. When you go to our website, there's a little pop-up for School Meals Celebration Week that'll lead you right there. Would be awesome if you could take 2 minutes and fill out the form just with a message of support, because these folks really are the ones doing the work every day to make this possible. So with that, I want to thank our panelists. Thank you all so much for taking some time to be with us and share your expertise with us. And I want to thank all of our attendees for taking your time to join us. Thank you for being a part of this work. This is a solvable issue here. And I know that it's going to take all of us, though, and take the partnership of everyone on this call. But if we all join together we truly can end child hunger here in Maine. So thank you and have a wonderful weekend.